Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Cynthia Riddle, co-chair of the Writers Education Committee, along with Brian Gary, and Vice Chair Ken Pisani, who's going to be our moderator tonight of our panel. The Writers Education Committee has a broad mandate to develop programs that provide WGA members with practical inside knowledge about how the industry works and how it's changing, emphasizing tips and tools to help writers succeed. By the way, our next meeting is Thursday, July 10th on Zoom. We hope you can join us. But in the meantime, tonight, our panel is focused on features, working with actors production companies from page to screen. We have creative execs at actor-based production companies, screenwriters who've worked with these companies, agents and buyers to help give you more information. Moderating our panel tonight is Ken Pisani, our committee vice chair and co-chair of this event, along with Kieran Berger. And Yusuf Nash and I are on the subcommittee. Ken is a film and TV writer, also a playwright and published novelist. His first two books were optioned for TV. Ken, I'm going to turn it over to you.
We'll answer as many questions as we can after the panel discussion. You can put them in the Q&A, although you might want to wait to see if we answer it during the panel. I'm getting a message here. Yes, my language is English, confirmed. The panel's full bios on the program, you received it via email. Luke wins the headshot competition. And so I'm going to go ahead with the abbreviated introductions and we'll get right to the conversation. We have Executive Vice President of Creative at Artist Equity, Drew Vinton.
Hello.
Director of Development at Bassett Vance Productions, Lonnie Rogers.
Hello.
Head of the studio at Heartbeat Productions, Luke Kelly Klein.
Hi there.
Feature literary agent from the Verve Agency, Olivia Mascaroni.
Hey guys.
Senior Film Executive Development and Production at Amazon MGM Studios, Michael Chong.
Hello.
And I'm really thrilled to have these screenwriters with us. Rose Gilroy, who wrote Fly Me to the Moon for Scarlett Johansson's These Pictures, and Alex Convery, screenwriter of Air, the spec picked up and produced by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon's Artist Equity.
Hello.
So, Lonnie, I worked briefly with Bassett Vance when you held the option on my second book. So let me start with you. Can you give us sort of the mile-high overview? Can you walk us through the broad strokes of the development process, working directly with writers? I assume you're developing material in-house for both Angela and Courtney, and you receive material from outside. So just take us through a typical case study.
Yeah, of course. The case study that I can point to now is something that came just out of a general. I think because Angela and Courtney are creative and they have that deeply in their heart, we love kind of pushing forward new talent and up and coming talent or talent that just hasn't had that chance to show run. So there was a meeting that the company had with a talented writer, Joshua Allen Griffith. And from that meeting, we explained the mandate and we really got to get to know him and what he's into and the kind of stories that he really wants to tell. And he went away, came back with a book that really resonated with him. And then from that, he created an amazing take. We developed it and figured it out with him. We ended up getting a writer alongside with him, Ben Smith from Only Murders of the Building, and we ended up setting it up with 20th and sold it to Onyx. So, just an example of it really does start from the ground up, and that's how we like to work. We really like to kind of get in when it's a seed of an idea because that's when we see the most sparks. And then, we kind of take it from there. And I will say only about 15% of our slate is with Courtney and Angela to star in. It really is formatted for them to EP. And if something kind of makes sense that's for them, then we just ask for it to be a little bit more fleshed out than just an idea, just so we have like an accurate runway. But if there's something that makes sense, then absolutely always happy to kind of take a look from there as well.
So that's great. They came out of a general. So did you give Joshua any ideas, or did you just give him some sort of areas to spin on and get back to you with?
No, I think a big thing about this company that I truly admire from all of the work that I've seen is it really is giving the writers agency to tell the stories that they want to tell, because we think that perspective is very important and it needs to be celebrated. And then what we do is we'll come in and we'll kind of have that market eye, of course, and figure out like, okay, well, this is the idea. Now, how can we figure this out in a way that it's a dirty word, but might be commercial, or something that feels like it can, speak to a wider audience, but it still holds your authenticity. So that's kind of how we kind of go about it, and it's worked.
Great, thank you. Luke, you head up the Kevin Hart business. Excuse me, can you walk us through your process there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I will say Lonnie gave a really wonderful breakdown of how things work at our company too. Lonnie, you can come work at Heartbeat if you want any day. I think, we do always look for writers who have really unique voices, really unique cultural perspectives, perspectives that we've not seen on TV or on the screen before in film. One of the things that we also look for is a really, really clear and salient why for the pitch and for the story that they're bringing in. Whether it's a piece of IP, whether it's a very early, expanded log line, there's a lot of, I think, shopping for commercial ideas and figuring out like, oh, well, what if you like this? It's like opening the coat and all the watches are here sometimes. And what we try to look at is what do you care about more than anything else? And also, what do you want to say with that idea? And if we can get to the why, we can really help shape, a story around that why, as Lonnie said, that's going to be effective in the marketplace as well as with audiences.
So why seems to be a big, we hear that a lot, like why this, why you, why now?
Mhm.
That's a that's a big starting point for you when you meet a writer.
It absolutely is. And I mean, it's to your point, it can sometimes become trite or cliche, those three W's, right? But really what it comes down to is, yes, are you passionate? Of course, but why at this moment in the zeitgeist is this specific idea or this piece of IP that you're trying to adapt something that you believe will resonate, right? And by the way, it's then on us as your producing partners to say, okay, we think this part of it will resonate really beautifully. This part may be trickier. So how do we embed, some of the, I don't want to say vegetables, but some of the pieces that may not be as commercial within a Trojan horse that is very commercial and that buyers all around town will respond to,
Like
right?
if dog,
Say it again.
even a pill to your dog, you wrap it in the cheese or
Or like peanut butter. Yeah, exactly. But we find that if we come at an idea with a writer as just that simple thing, what do you want people to walk away with after they've seen your work? What is the most salient, sort of most powerful element that you want them to feel in their gut? What commentary are you making, right? Not to be incredibly overt, but just what is the message that you want people to take away and what do you want them to remember, right? And if you start from that place, you can usually start to architect a story that serves that aim.
great, thank you.
Of course.
For Mass Advance, you also have two principles to develop for, and certainly you're developing for material that's not for Matt and Ben.
Mhm.
Your turn. Tell us about how you look at it.
I mean, I would say Luke's exactly right. We are looking for somebody with their own voice. They are convinced of their own argument already. They don't need to sort of open up the watches and go, is it blue? Is it red? Like they have to have belief in what they're writing, and they have to love it for themselves. Like it's one thing to look at the market and be strategic about what the market is buying, but 12 months down the way, it might be something different. And by the time you've written your screenplay, you're like, well, I thought romantic comedies were in favor, and no, now they're not. Like it's a fool's game to try and guess what people are going to want. Proceed on your own path, believe in your own voice, be excited about your own story, because we all are part of a storytelling machine, right? And it begins with the writer. And from that architectural plan, we build the building. And sometimes we'll increase the bathroom here, we'll like do modest adjustments, but we bought the architectural plan because we love the idea of building that house. And the writer is the owner of that architectural plan the first time it ever gets out. And the writer, him, herself, themselves, they have to love it. And we want to see that and almost be convinced by that passion, and be carried with it, because sometimes these things don't love you back for a while. There's a lot of effort placed in getting things to market and getting things through all the hoops you have to do. So I would say that's my first principle advice, is like follow your own voice, and don't worry about the noise out there. Like you'll be happier as a result, I think. So that's my first.
Do you find that you're approached by people, however passionate they are about the idea, with do people come to you and say, this is perfect for Matt, or this is perfect for Ben, or this is perfect for Matt and Ben, or does that matter?
Yeah. I mean, people are going to have opinions, aren't they? But like, that it's sort of the proof is in the pudding. Okay, so it is. Maybe you're right. Maybe I know by page two it's definitely not. Um, it's on the page, so all the bunting around it is just. It's good to have an argument to verbally say this is why I think it's really good, and it's got quippy dialogue. If it's a comedy, it's got meaningful set piece, meaningful action that comes from the actual organics of the story versus just set pieces randomly placed for emotional reasons. I don't know. But the proof is on the page. So like, let the words do the talking. Be concise about how you sell it, um, and be accurate about how you sell it. Like some pieces are not not going to be perceived as commercial. However, maybe things can be done at a budget level where they are commercial. Um, like there's all kinds of ways. Everything is its own animal. Um, and we have to treat that animal as a singular individual and say, okay, how do we position this? It's a different type of story. This is much more cerebral or intellectual. So we take different tacks as we try and nurture it to life, right? Uh, but ultimately, it has to come down to a compelling 2 hours for somebody to either sit in the theater or sit in front of their television set and watch a gripping movie.
I
This
would
is a
like
good.
to add onto Drew's comment just on the Angela and Courtney front. I'm actually very allergic when people say, I have the perfect role for ... And I think that's because you have already shot yourself in the foot by putting yourself in a box of the parameters of what you think the script will be and what you think the outcome will be, as opposed to focusing on the characters and focusing on the world, and also being receptive to exploring how to make that broader and bigger. Because I think in your mind, if you're saying this will be perfect for ... then you're thinking back and you're thinking on roles that they've done as opposed to roles that they could do. Um, so that's just my 2 cents there. I think it's just always good to just focus on a story, focus on a world,
Agree.
focus on the script, and then, who's for it will be for it.
Yep.
I think Lonnie, to that point, it's really interesting that you say that. I think so much of that want
Mhm.
from writers and creators is to get a fast yes in the marketplace, right? You know that the value that talents like, Angela or Courtney or Kevin or Matt or Ben hold is so vast in a
Yeah.
marketplace where, talent means so much, as of course it should, that it almost feels like a shortcut when
Mhm.
really what we look for when bringing on partners, as I'm sure everybody on this call does, um, are people who are just passionate about the art of the thing. And
Right.
then we help them shape for the most commercial, most viable, most, likely to sell incarnation of that art.
Agree.
It's great advice. I know a lot of writers, we look for the voice, and so we write sometimes for actors. I tend not to do that, although I find myself writing for Courtney a lot just because I love him so much. I hear his voice very often. I'm going to move on to the writer's perspective. Alex and Drew talked about it's on the page, and you've got a great story. You wrote a great spec, and I believe that did become the first feature from Artists Equity. Can you take us through your story?
Yeah, 100%. I'm relating to a lot of what's being said. I feel like you hear all the time, write what you know, and write what you're passionate about. For me, that was always kind of difficult because I was just like a boring kid from the suburbs of Chicago. I didn't have like I always sort of got frustrated with that advice because I felt like I didn't have that sort of like personal story, which led to me writing, a lot of like lowest common denominator stuff. Like as Drew was alluding to, I was sort of chasing the market. Like, okay, go write a contained horror or a elevated sci-fi, and that's just like when you chase genre like that, you normally come out with something that just seems like, again, the lowest common denominator of all those great movies we've seen before. And that's where I found myself. But, I during the pandemic, there wasn't a lot else to do, right? So I kind of had this unique opportunity to just sort of write one of those, just for you scripts. And the one thing I was super passionate about growing up in the suburbs of Chicago in the 90s was the Bulls, and Michael Jordan. Like that was really my childhood. I remain a huge sports fan today, but like I credit watching those Bulls teams when I was just a little kid with my dad to like what got me so passionate about sports. Um, so it was just like a right place, right time thing where the only thing on during the pandemic that was new was the Last Dance documentary. And obviously I was watching that rather religiously, as I feel like many people were, just because it was something new. Um, and there was that like 5 minute little clip in it about the Nike deal and the story. And for whatever reason, and I feel like as writers, a lot of times you just have to have your antenna up, and just hearing about how impossible the deal was and how it never should have happened and how, Adidas and Converse had just sort of like an obvious lane in and they botched it, and these underdog random executives at Nike swooped in. It was just like, it just made me say, huh, that seems really interesting. And then, like all good writing, you search for the character, and finding the character of Sonny Vaccaro, who Matt ended up playing, it was just sort of like the perfect entryway into the story, and it felt like, look, it was still sort of crazy to write that idea on spec because I didn't have any of the rights, but it was a movie about Michael Jordan that didn't have him as the protagonist, and at the same time, like Phil Knight's in the movie, but it's not an adaptation of Shoe Dog. So not that I was even thinking about that at the time, but it was above everything else, I was so excited to write it. And as I'm sure everyone in the Zoom knows, like writing is impossible, right? It's so hard, and you just want to beat your head against the wall like every time you open Final Draft. And this idea was the exact opposite for me, like I just had so much fun writing it, and I had so much fun in that world with those characters, and it just sort of like I kind of caught that feeling and just didn't let go. Even though like the practical side of me, every time I opened Final Draft was like, why are you doing this? Like who is this for? And like
It was
there's
for you.
chance.
It
Yeah,
was for you,
exactly.
and that's why it worked.
Yeah, that's it,
The voice was real. It was passionate. It was accurate. It was interesting. You can keep going on, but like that's what I'm talking about. Like like you have fun when the writer has fun. If the writer's having problems, you know it on the page. You just sense it. You can see it's like, wow, this like they're trying to get through avenues that seem commercial or the appropriate formulaic way without actually going through the organic joy of making the thing. And that's why we loved it. So thank you for writing it.
No, but that's sort of the bottom line, it really felt like it was for me. I mean, I didn't even tell my reps I was writing it, because I knew they would smartly be like, you should stop doing that immediately. But it was sort of just my like nights and weekends, for me project. And, of course, like as it goes, that's the one that ends up being my first credit, and it was really, I think just as Drew was saying, it was sort of like that personal element, even though it was a story that really had very little of me personally in it. I was so sort of passionate about it and driven by the material that it got there.
Yeah, I imagine when Alex came in to talk about this, he fills the room with his passion. Whereas I'm a Knicks fan and I'm not selling this movie.
You know, I think it is, not to just keep blabbering on, but you know, I think what you're saying is exactly right. You know, like we've all been there when we're on, you know, rewrite number 5 of a scene and you just come to the page with that energy of like, ugh, like I don't want to be here, you know, like I've tried this scene, it's not working, and I just have to get through it. And I've always found like if you have that energy coming into a scene, it's never going to work. Like it will never get there, you know? So it always becomes this idea of like, okay, how do I shake up the snow globe and sort of find like whatever it was I was passionate about, how can I get there? You know, what will flip this scene on its head? You know, how can I try something new in this sort of like boring expositional scene? How can I bring some character to it? How can I bring some life to it? And yeah, this idea just sort of the characters carried the way on it. And I was able to sort of just ride that.
Rose, let me ask you, Fly Me to the Moon took a completely different journey. I believe Scarlett came to you with the idea. Can you talk about how that came to be?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, so much that everyone's been saying resonates with my story. To start with, Lonnie, my first credit, Fly Moon, came from a general meeting. I I was not in the guild and I was not represented at the time. And I'd written like a bunch of spec scripts, some totally genre agnostic, like all across the board, none of which had been made. A couple had had like a little traction and attached some people here and there, but nothing had gotten made. And Scarlett had just formed These Pictures, which was her production company that was run by Jonathan Leah and Keenan Flynn, and they were out in LA. And Scarlett's agent had just through the grapevine, like read a couple of my samples and she passed it along for them. They were like looking for writers and they liked my stuff. I wrote like a really freaky, kooky sci-fi script. And anyway, they agreed to meet with me and we met in LA and they had like a 3-page deck for this idea. At the time it was called Artemis. And it was like, what if we, at the time was not supposed to be a love story, but it's just this general idea of like, what if we, like what you saw from the moon landing was real, but what you heard was fake, and playing with this idea of the truth and the moon landing. And I was, to play devil's advocate, like I was such a believer in the time, like I don't want to write what I know, I want to write what I don't know. Like I find so much inspiration from research, and I'd never been pitched anything like this. Like no one had come to me at the time. I was 24 years old, I'm 31 now, just to tell you it was a long development process, but I'd never been pitched something in space, and the idea that someone would even like consider me for this was crazy. And so I went back and I did the pitch, and I think I pitched for them like twice, and ultimately they said no. They were like, you're too green and you're not in the guild, and like, I'm so sorry, we can't hire you. And I just like didn't hear it. I was like, I got the job, this is so crazy. And I proceeded to write, and this speaks to Alex's story, in a delusional state, honestly, the first 30 pages on spec for this script that I didn't have the job for. And I sent it to them and I didn't hear anything for 2 months. And then I got this email like out of the blue, like, okay, we never do this, but these are like really great pages and you got the job. And to speak to Alex's point, like you always hear about development hell, and we spent like 3 years developing the script and I never had anything but fun with it. It was just from that point on, it was like an endless, I was so grateful to have the job, and I loved like being the underdog, and it was just like every day that I got to work on it felt like Christmas. And so yeah, it just I think I really resonate with what everyone said, and yeah, that's my story.
300 people watching this right now, and they're both of you. Agency's perspective, Olivia, can I bring you in on this? How do you handle both angles of this? I'm sure you have clients who have written something that might be, Lonnie, cover your ears, perfect for an actor, or else an actor comes to you. Maybe it's an OWA or something. Can you walk us through how the agency handles that?
Oh, I don't know if you want the big bad agency's perspective. That seems like it's unnecessary for all of these better accounts than mine. I think
Writers are when you get
I mean, I think at the end of the day, look, like I first of all, I just want to say for everyone on this panel and everyone that I'm have the great privilege to be here with, like, we don't do what you do. Like, we're agents, we make phone calls, we make deals, we can't write, we're not nearly as, we have barely enough creativity to go to work every day. So thank you guys for existing and making our jobs more fun. I think for me, it's because I also work in the independent space. And so to me, it's a lot about like, it's already going to take you so much longer. It's going to take you 2 years. I mean, every movie is an independent movie until it's not, basically, is my opinion personally. So how do you want to spend this time? And to everyone's, previous point, it needs to be fun. It needs to be a good time, because if you're not already having a good time from like the get-go, then it's not going to get better in prep or production. Like, it's just not. And then unless you want to watch like something explode and not in a good way in theaters, then it's not gonna be a good time. So for me, when I get that OWA from an actor, or when I get the idea from one of my clients, I think, okay, who would want to hang out with you for 2 years and work on that with you? Who would think that that's a really fucking cool idea? Excuse me, I'm sorry. But like, who would really just want to be there? And then I sort of go backwards from there. So like right now I have, without naming names, in OWA, where two actors basically came together who are very unlikely, and they were like, hey, we really want to find something to do together. But of course, you go out to the town and you're like, hey, does anyone have any scripts for two men this age who go on an adventure, kind of thing? And they didn't find anything. And I, found them some writers who I was like, I think that these guys would have a good idea for you. And now they're pitching the actors, which is so fun to kind of, and they pitched one of the actors today, and the actor in question cried during like the pitch meeting, which I was like, yes, I mean, no, I mean, yes, but also, so it's really my job to help. Like, it's like dating. Like, I want to make sure you guys have good relationships, and that fosters great creativity. It's not my job to say, hey, this is a great idea for a movie or not, because I always like to say one of my favorite films of all time is Everything Everywhere All at Once. If I had read that script and you had said to me, hey, can you find people to invest in this? Can you find people to produce this? I'd be like, there's no way in hell. Like, I do not know what this is. I don't know what it looks like. I have no idea. And it's one of my favorite things of all time. So it's not my job to tell you, hey, this is or isn't makeable. It's my job to say, how badly do you want this, and what kind of people do you need to support you on this journey? And then go from there.
You're right. The chemistry is really important. That aspect of like finding the right vibe, I guess, would be the word.
True, it's okay. You can use that word. We give you permission. It's okay.
Okay. Where there's a real connection, and eye contact and discussion, and listening as well as speaking, is always good. But without that chemistry, you're never going to lift off the ground. Like you really need to have that positive energy. Otherwise, it just things go south very quickly.
Yeah. Michael, thank you for your patience. As a buyer and destination for the finished project, all this is happening before it gets to you. Can you tell us what happens once a project comes across your desk? I know you have some recent examples. I think two from Nick Stoller with Will Ferrell attached.
Yeah, I would note that, we pick up things at all phases and all stages. So, something like Air, which kind of came with Alex's great script, obviously Artist Equity, Skydance Sports, Mandalay, as well as Ben directing, Matt starring, kind of came with a full package ready to go, and Ben wanting to go shoot it. And so there's that version of a project that kind of is coming in going, we want to go make this. And then there's the version where we are developing with these fine folks on this call, projects from scratch, or an existing script or an IP of some sort, where we are much more involved from a day-to-day perspective on the development aspect of it. So I think it varies depending on what stage we end up getting involved on a project, but it can be at all stages.
Do you prefer people approaching you? Obviously, attachments are great, but do you prefer they have a script or a pitch, because that gets you more involved?
I can tell you personally, it's always amazing to be involved on the development creative side. It's much more fun that way. I get to create relationships with the people that are involved from a creative perspective, and really be a part of the team. So it's always nice to do that. It's not always necessarily the case, we love all our babies the same in terms of when they get made. But it is really fun being a part of the development process. the question of do we like to get involved at script stage or pitch stage, I think is all dependent on the project and what kind of project it is, who's pitching it, what kind of attachments are involved. And there's so many X factors. It's a hard question to generally answer. And then on top of that, not to tout my company, but like we are doing both theatrical and streaming on at Amazon MGM. So, there's there's a lot of different factors and lots of different types of movies that we're targeting for each version of release. And so it gets a little hard to define exactly just generally what and when we would get involved with.
Can I ask the producers here, once you have a script or a project that you're happy with, what's your process for approaching Michael?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think when we have a project that we feel is ready for prime time, we will often look to attach a director, a filmmaker to bring that project to the next level, right? To take what's on the page and really give it a sense of visual dynamism, right? Of casting input, perhaps, in this marketplace, and Michael can speak to this, I'm sure, in more depth. It's tricky, right? Different buyers have different ideas of the talent that's going to move the needle for them. I would say outside of maybe uh 10 people in Hollywood, right? It's largely in this marketplace, and as streamers and distributors in general have differentiating identities, what may work at an Amazon may not work at an Apple or a Netflix. So the way that we look to do it is find the best possible filmmaker who's going to be an evangelist and a creative addition to the project, and then go take that project out and pitch around town.
Totally. Yeah, completely agree with everything Luke said. And in addition, because we know that the development process also takes a bit of time, and within that time, so many different changes can happen. I used to work at Amazon, so I completely understand like the buyer side in terms of like, what's needed one day in terms of programming may not be needed like the next day and so have you. So while the development process is happening, we'll also start to kind of have conversations and reach out to Michael or someone else at like Apple or wherever and continue to keep our finger on a pulse just to make sure that we're up to date with everything that's going on in their world, because we also have to assume that there are thousands of writers, thousands of people coming to like, the six folks in town to really kind of go to for one specific project. So we want to make sure that we're always aware and in the conversation. So by the time we are ready to go to them, it's super streamlined and we're bringing them something that we feel fits what they're looking for.
I'm sure coming in with Will Ferrell attached or Matt and Ben, it makes a project
No brainer.
yeah, undeniable, we like to say now. Do you ever, Drew, do you ever stock the pond? I was looking at Unstoppable and it's loaded with stars. Did you really try to just put together an undeniable package to
I
bring
mean,
that out?
it's nice to be employed by two gents who have an incredible Rolodex of stars, and that they can just text to him, would you like to be in this? And they can do the personal pitch, which is usually fairly effective. Look, our all of our jobs on the development side is to present the best argument we can uh, to Michael and people like him, and to convince him that we are right, and in saying that this will bring in the crowd. This will actually be a piece that will garner a lot of audience interest. Will please their customer base, because that's what they're trying to do. Um, and we are also trying to do the same thing. And sometimes we disagree. Sometimes they don't see what we see, and that's fine. Sometimes they absolutely do, and that's great. But it's up to us to present the argument. And we can, story is a matter of personal taste, but like you can also look at data that helps support the idea of people will come see this type of movie if we present them with great elements attached to that, great actors that are also, all the better. If we don't have that at this time, and we want to actually have a conversation about who does work for you in this, that's better. But it's up to us to convince the Michaels of the world that it's in their interest to board. And
And
it's
as
a
we're,
fun job.
as we're talking about Unstoppable, I mean, I'm sure we've all noticed the expansion of talent-based production companies. And at the end of the day, when we look at this, or we're looking at even the topic of this panel, it is about working with talent-based production companies. It's not just about attaching that talent. And the importance of that, if you're going to a talent-based company for producerial efforts, it's the people like Drew, like Luke, like Lonnie, that you're going to be involved with on a daily, day-to-day basis. So you really have to connect with the people and the producers that you're working with. And for us, in particular, especially if that talent is not involved, it's about working with the producers beside the talent that are going to be the day-to-day on it, and trusting in them to be able to actually produce the film. So for the writers, it really is about finding that connection with with your producer and trusting in them to help shepherd your project that you've, obviously crafted from passion.
What's different about this one?
I was just gonna say, I definitely agree with what Michael's saying. I think like, especially with small talent, a lot of the talent-based production companies are smaller, and that's a really cool thing because, those people who are running the company, whether it's Lonnie or Luke, like at least in my experience, you're gonna be in the trenches with them throughout the whole process. It could be years. And so it really does, you want to find not just a shared connection personally, but a shared interest in the material. I think that's where like the best stuff really comes out of. So
I think that's exactly right. Passion. You have to, match each other's passion and feed off each other's passion. It should be fun. We're creating things. There's obviously pressure to monetize, but like let's not forget that things are coming out of our brain. We're imagining things. It should be a fun process to do that. So the people you work with should embolden you to go further in that regard. So
I
I'm
think it's
just
just to cue off that, I think it's such a myth of like, oh, development process is such hell and like it's going to be this really, horrible thing. I think it should be fun, and the notes that you get should make you excited, and that's where like the magic is going to come from. So I agree. I think go into it like knowing it's going to be a process, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I think as soon as we start talking about development hell, we're on a bad road. What's different about the process when a project comes in that's not a natural fit for your principal? Um, Luke, prom dates. Can we talk about prom dates? How did that doesn't seem a natural fit for Kevin. So how does that happen?
Yeah. No, a movie about two high school ladies finding prom dates is not a Kevin Hart vehicle. We figured that out very quickly. But it came in, DJ Mausner, who was the writer, this was their first produced credit. They had done some, sketch comedy work in Canada that had made its way to TV, but in the feature space, really this was the first thing. I received the script in 2021. Um, Not dissimilar to Alex. I was watching The Last Dance on repeat and doing very little else. And when DJ's manager, who's a close friend of mine, sent me this draft, it was just such a cool modern telling of the John Hughesy um, sort of comedies that were from yesteryear and from all of our childhoods and adolescence periods. And I got on with DJ and I said again, as I said at the top of this conversation, like, what is it about this movie that you really feel needs to be told, right? Beyond the comedy, which was excellent. And at the heart of the story was this really wonderful coming out story for one of our leads, a character named Hannah that was played by Julia Lester. And DJ talked about why that was so, important to them personally and why they hadn't seen it really justice done to that kind of a story in big body raunchy comedies. And I love that juxtaposition of heart with vomit and fart jokes in a movie. And so I called up my buddies Jeremy Garlick and Will Phelps, who I knew had an output deal at Hulu and who specialized in this sort of teen high school comedy, boundary pushing, R-rated thing. They loved the script as well. We did, maybe 3 or 4 months of development work on it. And then Hulu said, yeah, we want this. So it was a really, really unique example. I would say from the moment that DJ and I had our first call as I was walking through LAX to premiering on Hulu in, 2020, May of 2024, was like 2.5 or 3 years, which is unusual, I find. But that was how that one came to be.
I want to get back to the writers for a second. Alex and Rose, can you tell me how Aaron Fly Me to the Moon opened doors for you, and has it made you approach material differently when you sit down to write? Do you think more about what actors can I bring this to, or are you just not doing that? Are you really just you approach the material first?
Personally, I never think about who's playing the role. I just think there's such a small lane for that to happen. And look, especially when you're writing true stories, like I just picture the real people, like it makes it a little bit easier. But at the same time, you want to write for movie stars, like who is that movie star? Well, it sort of depends on the material. I think I mean, if you go back and read Adventures in the Screen Trade, like William Goldman is talking about this in the 70s, it's like there's no surer path for a movie getting made than a top list A-list star saying, I want to go make this movie. And they're generally going to want to make the movie if they have a big role in it, so it's like, I just think, especially when you're writing on spec, which I still do, but obviously at the beginning, that's all I was doing. I think a lot about character intros, and like, how are you introducing this character? Like when you're talking about an A-list actor reading this thing, like not to fall into stereotype, but like, they're not giving it a like a close note-driven read the very first time, it's sort of like first impression is so important, especially on a spec. So I'm like, those first 5 pages, like I want that to punch the reader in the gut, and like especially the protagonist and the main characters. It's like, how can you tell me everything about who this character is by showing it? Like what are they doing that's surprising or different? There's so many great examples throughout cinema of just that iconic character intro. And I think every movie you should think about that, like across genre or the size of the movie. Like even, again, it doesn't have to be a big action movie or small Sundance movie, like all good writing is good writing. Like, whether it's Little Miss Sunshine or whether it's Star Wars, like they have great characters at the center of it. So, that's how I think about it. And generally for a performer, they're gonna want to play an interesting, complex, surprising character, someone that's doing something new or unique or different. So it for me, it's always like, how can I get into that very quickly? And how can I, by what the character's doing when we meet them, how can that tell us everything about who they are, and the world they live in, and sort of the way they see the world, and you just try to flip that all on its head. It's really easy just to sit here and talk about it. It's incredibly hard to execute it, but when it's done well, it is, again, that sort of like buzzword undeniable. I think you know it very quick.
Well, you mentioned William Goldman, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is sort of the gold standard, the way he introduces those two characters. I think now a lot of writers make the mistake, got to grab in the first 5 pages, so it's bombs going off, it's helicopters crashing, everything, and then we freeze and we say 3 weeks earlier. So there's that kind of cheat, but it's when you can really just do that channel introduction of your characters and just, oh, tell me more. That just feels better.
It's only a cheat if it doesn't work, though, like, I mean, you think of Walter White standing in his underwear in the middle of the desert with a gun and the cops coming, and then it's like 3 weeks earlier. Like, yeah, it's kind of a cheat, but you're also like, I have to watch the rest of this, So it's like, it's just like, oh, like you can't use voiceover. Well, like, watch Goodfellas. Like you can if it's good, like that's where you can run into trouble, is just trying something without it being from a character-driven perspective. But again, that's just it's undeniable, and it's like I think you know, younger and up and coming writers often have this sort of misconception, and I certainly had this for a little bit of like, oh, like I can't break the rules when I'm not established because I don't want it to seem like I don't know what I'm doing, or like that I'm cheating, or that like, you know, someone's going to throw my screenplay out because there's like weird formatting on the first page. I actually think the opposite is true, you know, like when you're coming up, you want to take risks, you know, you want to swing big and try to hit that home run because that's what's going to get you noticed. And at this stage, when you're unrepped, like that's the whole game, right? Is like, how can this script stand out? You know, it's the deck is a little stacked, right? You're talking about someone who has 10 scripts on their iPad that they have to read that weekend. So the whole game is like, how can my title page stand out? How can my character stand out? How can page one stand out? And you just keep like, and obviously the rest of it has to work too, but you know, you want to start with that very solid foundation. And I've usually found, you know, it's like, uh, if the first 30 pages are great, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt. If, you know, there are some problems in the last 30 pages, people will at least want to meet and talk about the script, right? The inverse, I don't think is true. You know, like if the first 30 pages don't work, it's sort of like people are like, you know, they stop reading. It's just sort of the fact of it. And I can speak as someone who was an unpaid reader intern for a long, long time, you know? So anyway, sorry to keep rambling, but it's just like, it's all about that character intro.
Your take, please.
I would say I couldn't agree more with everything Alex just said. I think that's gold advice through and through. I mean, I'll start with, break every rule you can. Like what's one of the greatest screenplays in my opinion of all time? Alien. They break every rule. It's the weirdest screenplay of all time. Like, don't let anyone tell you can't say we or do your own thing. I mean, have it feel real and inherent. Have a reason that you're formatting it that way, whether it's the pacing or how you want it to come through. But you know, don't be scared to break the mold. And yeah, when it comes to writing for an actor, I agree with what Alex said. I never write with a specific star in mind. I'm just trying to write the best character that you can. I'm really of the opinion, like if you write a killer character, everyone's going to want to do it, you know, especially who knows who's going to end up playing your part. Like it's no secret. Artemis, Chris Evans was slated to play that part, dropped out. Channing Tatum dropped in. Like you should have a great part that can outlast, you know, whatever tragedies your movie's going to go through from start to finish. And yeah, I agree too with the opening. You got to write show, don't tell. Have a killer opening that can try and encapsulate who this person is, just in their motivations, right? You know, that was in the first 30 pages for Artemis that won me the job. I have, you know, whether or not you saw the movie, it's about kind of a con woman who goes in to sell the moon. And I have her in the opening scene selling this car ad with a fake pregnancy belly. And like the reason for that is you're going to learn everything about who is this person. She has no morals. She'll sell whatever you're paying her to believe, right? And so if you can have a scene that encapsulates your character's beliefs right up front, I think that's such gold advice for Alex to bring up. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of that.
Olivia, Michael mentioned earlier how important it is to want to work with not just the actors, but the producers at these companies. We know writers get rewritten or replaced all the time. What's your strategy to make sure your writer stays attached for the life of the project? I mean, obviously, if there's as passionate as Alex and Rose and as good at what they're doing, that may be easy. But do you have a strategy to deal with that?
I think that's something that I try to assess early on in the process, as opposed to sort of, you know, hoping it works out again, like kind of going back to what I was saying previously. Guys, forgive me for saying this, but these are some really good writers and some really good producers on this Zoom. Not all producers are good producers. Just because you say you're a producer doesn't mean that you're good at it. And it becomes really apparent very quickly through the process if you are hired to write a script, if the producer has a sense of what they want or is good at guidance or has experience before. You try to suss that out as much as possible before getting your client involved in a process that might end badly. So again, I don't want to send any of my clients to go into a process where even if they do get paid, and then there's also the choice that you guys can make. I might call one of my clients, like if I called Alex and I was like, hey, listen, they're going to pay you $1 million. They're total idiots and you're not going to enjoy the process, but if you want it, you can do it. And like, maybe you'll enjoy it, or maybe you'll totally rip your hair out, but like, here you go. And for some people, they're cool with that. Like they're water off a duck's back. They can totally take it. They're into it. Other people are like, I don't want to spend my time doing that. I want to spend my time working on something I really care about. I don't care if the money is not $1 million. And that is more important to me. So it's also about knowing kind of how each individual will respect the process and how they will take it. So that's also part of my job, is making sure that if I put someone in a situation, it's going to allow them to flourish in the best way possible, as opposed to putting them in a situation where they're going to do bad work or suffer or leave the industry because they have such a bad time. Don't want to do that.
You all have first looks and pods. Does that affect your development process? Lonnie, I think you're at 20th. If somebody brings you something that you know this really isn't a good fit for them, but you like it, would you take it on because you know 20th is going to pass and now I can take it out wider than that?
Yeah, I think luckily for us, we do have a first look and not an overall. So it gives us the ability to be able to, if it's not right for 20th, which by and large means it's probably not right for the Disney territories, we can take it elsewhere. And I think that that's worked for us, and it's something that we will plan on doing, because we also want to make sure that we're creating things from a place that it'll end up in a home that it's meant to end up in. Like, we don't want to necessarily just be too focused on, okay, if you're bringing this project in, it has to be for 20th and that has to just be it. So, and if it's for 20th, that means it needs to just be for like just those specific territories. I think that that's 100% our main goal. But with respect to the writers as well, we want to make sure that we're looking at characters, we're looking at themes, we're bringing it to 20th, and we're doing everything in our power to make sure that it's right for their ecosystem. And then if it's not, then we'll take it somewhere else.
Luke and Drew, same question. I assume you approach it the same way. You're just going to move on from Netflix and.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. For us, Kevin has an overall at Netflix. So for projects, on the feature side, so for projects that we feel like he's going to be additive in, if it's not going to work for Netflix, it's probably not going to work for us, right? Outside of that, though, we have the capacity to go anywhere. So we did, we've had other first looks at other places, both on the scripted and unscripted side, and we approach it the same way as Lonnie. You always just want to be really upfront with, your writer partner about what the process looks like from here, who you will be sharing it with first based on your deal, and then if and when they pass, what the next steps are. You also want to be really candid with your partners on the other side when you're bringing it in to say, hey, I know this might not be the thing, right? But out of respect for our deal, I want to bring it to you. Can you give it a quick read? So if it's not the thing, we can take it somewhere else.
Totally.
Yeah, and we don't have a deal, so we're just out to the market.
Michael, do you have a dream project? Something you would love something that you're really either dying for, undeniable? What would you like people to bring you?
That is the hardest question I think I've ever heard. Michael, I'm
really,
defending you here.
thank you. I appreciate that, Drew. That is an absolutely difficult question to answer. Honestly, I don't have one single project that I'm like, oh, this is something that I'm either working on right now, that or that I never got the chance to make, and is something that I really want to have made here. I mean, I want to make good movies. I want to entertain folks. I want to say something with the movies that we make, if possible. And by the way, for me, it's also perfectly fine to entertain somebody for 2 hours. Like, this world is hard enough. Like, if we can find 2 hours to make people laugh or have people enjoy themselves, I'm okay with that as well. But ultimately, the ones that resonate are the ones that actually leave you with the mark after you've sat in the theater or you've sat in home for 2 hours and spent your time watching it. Something that you're thinking about afterwards, something you're thinking about days after you've watched it, and it stays with you. And usually those are the ones that have a message behind it, that leave an emotional resonance to it. And I think those projects are particularly really hard to come by, and it's definitely something I'm always looking for.
Short fiction is enjoying a resurgence, and Verve has been, I think, especially successful at setting up short fiction as IP. Luke, Lonnie, Drew, do any of you look at short stories when you're looking to develop material?
Drew, you go.
I will look at anything. I mean, as I said before, everything is its own animal at its own stage of development. And the trick is, do you see qualities within it at whatever stage they are, where you're like, hell, I want to nurse this to life from day one or day 20 or whatever, right? The trick is really, it's got to be a pull the lapel sensation for me. Like, I don't want to waste Matt and Ben's time on stuff that isn't truly worthwhile and that I don't love, right? Like I'm not looking at this as like this is a piece of business. This is it. No, this is stuff that you're going to commit to for a long time. And sometimes, as I say, it doesn't love you. Sometimes there are really difficult moments in it. And so you've got to love it. And I assume it's the same for writing, the actual process of it. It's like there are hard days, and for every page I read, there are 20 in the bin. Like so. This is why I hugely respect writers because I see the effort that goes behind the work for it to get to even me. So I don't know. That's kind of a roundabout way of saying whatever, but I always remember the great words from William Goldman. No one knows anything, right? It's given me tremendous comfort to think of that phrase of like no one knows anything. Like we are all kind of quasi imposters, quasi faking it. We have to be knowledgeable about the market. We have to keep reading. We have to keep meeting people who potentially could give us that script. But it comes down to our own palate. And that you develop over a series of years, hopefully, and whether you create or whether you adjudicate creation, um, by doing, you improve. But remember, no, everyone's fallible. Like we're all kind of doing this a little bit at the same time. And yeah, I think I'll stop talking now.
I want to ask my writers, Alex and Rose, on the subject of short fiction. Do either of you write fiction?
Oh, that was a question. Yes, no. So I will just say that we will board anything at any time. It depends what the qualities are. Over to you, Lonnie and Luke.
Completely agree.
Same. And there were some real nuggets in that,
Yeah.
Drew. By the way,
I'm going to shut up from now. Listen, I've said my
Keep
piece.
talking. Please keep talking.
There were some real nuggets in that. I'm glad this was recorded. I love that. Thank you.
I'm glad we all get to go to the private Drew panel after this for just us. That's going to be great.
The little TED
I'm
Talk.
going to turn off my screen now.
So good work. I'm going to ask you, Alex and Rose, do you write short fiction, or do you, when you have an idea, or do you try and pitch your agent and say, should I write this, or do you just sit down and spec it?
It's become, sort of this like fad the last 10 years, kind of selling short stories, and I have nothing against it. I mean, I think it's sort of like all about the high concept, and it's sort of like a way into a story. Personally, for me, I want to live in the screenplay if that's the final form it's gonna be. Again, nothing against, like any of these deadline articles that have netted writers tens of millions of dollars. That's awesome. And I'm all for it. At the same time, I look at them and I'm like, which one of these has become a classic film, or like which of them has even gotten over the finish line, I think it's great. It can be great for a sale, and like nothing against the sale, like go get it. At the same time, you're then directly into the development, So like you better, if you're gonna sell a great short story, that's sort of like the first act of a good idea, like you better know what that second and third act are, or else you're gonna find yourself sort of stuck in the mud of where a lot of these things get, which is a great first act. At the same time, I know a lot of people who just went and would go and write a book, and that sort of is like the finished form, right? I not to get too off tangent, but I'm sort of like tell the complete story, like and I think be able to see it. So again, that's a long sort of rambling, very opinionated answer. But if I'm going to spend time sort of like writing again on spec, I typically would prefer it just be a screenplay if that's what you want it to be to begin with. Not to speak to like any of the great short stories out there. I mean, George Saunders is one of my favorite authors ever, and he just about exclusively writes short stories, you know, like it's a beautiful art form. And I think it's funny that short fiction often makes for better adaptations than like trying to adapt a novel, you know, because you're like a short story really is sort of like a more it's easier to take a bite of that. But in the form you're referring to, Ken, which I think is sort of the like I'm gonna write a short story to go sell it, not to publish it in a collection of short stories. I don't know. I would always just sort of rather write the script.
Again, super aligned with Alex. And maybe this could just be like a personal thing. I would never, it'd be my nightmare to like go and pitch a log line because in my head's like, I have to go write it. You know, I could like sit there and explain to you this whole thing I'm going to paint, but in the end of the day, for me, it would fall so flat in comparison. And yeah, I'm also with you. I think, you know, I've been on general meetings where I'll say like a log line and someone's like, okay, you know, let's go sell that. And to me, it's the same thing with Alex. It's like, I don't know if that's a movie. Like I don't want to get into like the first 30 pages and know, oh my God, you know, it's not working. So yeah, I think do it. Just do it. Like not to be too cliche, but figure it out for yourself. And if it's great, then you have something great. And yeah, it's like to build off kind of what Drew was saying on his inspirational tangent. Like, I really think if you're obsessed with something and you're passionate about a script and you're really gonna have the drive to sit down and do it, like that's gonna beat, I don't even think I'm very talented. I think I'm just obsessed and passionate. And I think that's gonna beat, you know, any sort of talent every time. So if you have a great spec idea, just become obsessed with it and write it and get it done. And, you know, you don't need to waste time pitching something when the proof's in the pudding, in my opinion. So.
Drew, I think you got to start a podcast. Drew's inspirational tangent.
True. There you
The
go.
blatherer. Okay, I think somebody came up with that word, and I really like that word. So whoever it was, thank you.
I did a little movie over the weekend, The Life of Chuck. Started as a short story. A writer named Stephen King. Keep your eye on him. I think he's going to do great things. I have a broad question for everyone before I move on to, we have some Q&A from the audience. It's always a challenging marketplace, but man, it just seems harder than ever. I don't think as writers and certainly as producers, you talk, it's a long process, 2 years and some or more. We don't want to be chasing trends, but general advice you can offer writers listening right now.
I think it's been, you know, look, the write what you know sort of saying, right? That phrase that we hear over and over again as producers, as writers. I think what it really means is write the stories that you feel uniquely qualified to tell, right? And if you do that, and if you do that for the right reasons, what I mean by that is not just the quick paycheck, although we all like them, but if you do it for the reason that this story is bursting out of you, this commentary that you want to make, this mark on our cultural legacy that you want to have, right, is bursting out of you in every way, who cares about the vicissitudes of the marketplace? Some weeks are going to be up, some are going to be down, some years are going to be hard. That's not meant to trivialize what people are going through at this moment, right? Because it's a challenging time, but there is opportunity in every challenge. And if you can truly meet that challenge with something that you believe in and that you feel passionately about, I mean, that's why we're doing this, right? We've chosen this art and these professions because we can't imagine doing anything else.
Well
Anybody
put.
else? Olivia, how do you motivate your writers?
I was gonna say I'm gonna like dump a cold bucket of water on that if that's okay with everybody.
Do it.
Although I totally agree with Luke and I love sending people to work with Luke because he's amazing. So I'll just tell everybody out there right now kind of what I'm seeing from my angle of it, because obviously I think it's important that we all write interesting stories. And like Alex, you're a prime example of things that you can do so well. Rose, the movie that you wrote is absolutely amazing and like got a theatrical release. Like that's all you hope for. Is like your movie gets made, it gets a theatrical release, people see it, they point to posters, it goes to DVD, etc. Right now in the marketplace, if you want to write a script that will get off the ground, even if it doesn't get made, it needs to be entertaining. Like it just flat out needs to be entertaining. It needs to be something that someone can say, this deserves to be in a theater, either in a 10 screen release, a 3,000 plus screen release. Exactly to Luke's point, it's harder than ever. We all appreciate that you might have one time, like my grandmother, when she was coming to this country, like went on this crazy adventure that was incredibly hard and, soul sucking. And like, she made it through so many things. Great. Right now, the economy is down and the world is in a really bad place. Everyone wants to go to the theater to laugh or to get really scared. Like they want to hold each other and scream, or they want to hold each other and they're laughing. So like start there, start with those two pulls. Freak people out, make a really scary movie. Talk to Me made gangbusters, Paranormal Activity, point to that. I used to work at Blumhouse. Like you two can make millions of dollars of a $90,000 investment if you want to make a good horror movie. Or make something that's really funny and like a fun adventure and something that you would want to spend 2 hours of your life watching in a theater with your friends. Like that is where you should start. I think that it's really important to talk about right now because I think, especially as I work in the indie space, everyone's always like, I'm going to make this. I wrote this movie. It's perfect for Sundance. It's perfect for a film festival. It's perfect for the indie market. And I'm like, that market doesn't exist anymore. That market is now what we want the theatrical market to be. So all the buyers that are going to Sundance, South by, Tribeca, Cannes, you name it, they want their movies to go theatrical. They want them to open over 3,000 screens and be worthy of over $40 million of marketing P&A, which is how much it costs to get a movie into theaters. So that's where you have to start, just realistically. All of your stories are great ideas. Everything has value. I'm not saying any of you out there have bad ideas, but just know that going in, you will be so much further ahead of the pack.
And can I say, to Olivia's point too, like even if everything you write doesn't get made, or maybe you have, like, I think it's okay to write something crazy with a $200 million budget in mind, even if you are like, be delusional. And maybe that's not the script that gets made, but maybe that's the script that gets you the job, that launches your career. Like I spent 2 years writing that sci-fi thing that didn't get made. It's still not gotten made today, but it got me the general for Artemis. And like it doesn't have to get made to be a success too. And on that note, like I think what I would say to anyone who's struggling writing right now is, it's almost like you're climbing a mountain. Like this is not a glamorous job. It's cold and it's like icy and we're out there in our jackets and like we have our fucking ice pick and it's shitty and like we were trying to get to the top. And I think it's hard and you have to, remember, don't look up, don't look down, like look in front of you. If you try and think about, okay, I'm gonna have to write 120 pages of something, it's gonna seem impossible, but you just want to focus on what's in front of you. And also know that like, it's not always about getting to the top. Some of it is who you become on the way there and what you become as an artist on the way there. So I think, yeah, if you look at it as like, I have to get this made and have a theatrical release, it's going to be impossible, but I just have to write something good and maybe that'll get me to the next step. So just building off that.
Yeah, I couldn't echo those sentiments more, and I think, again, to both of your points, it's just because a spec doesn't make it to the big screen doesn't mean it can't be a career-making thing for you, Like for me, Air was very much not the first script I ever wrote, I had, 3 years earlier, the script that got me repped, like it had a huge actor attached and it had so many starts and stops, and I was just so convinced that this is the one, like it has to be, right? If it can get me repped and it can get this big movie star attached to it, like how could it not make it? And it didn't, and that's okay. That was so heartbreaking and so demoralizing. And you do kind of fall into that spiral of just like, hey, I guess like Hollywood is just the deck is stacked against you. But if I had not been through all of that, I wouldn't have the reps I had, they're the ones that circulated Air, obviously. And I also wouldn't have felt sort of, I guess I would say calloused, like working with that movie star, even though the movie didn't get made, I do feel like it prepared me to work with Matt and Ben in a unique way, and that I had like already had some of that experience, you know, and at the same time, that script set me up on almost 100 general meetings, and that's how I met Skydance and Mandalay, who bought the spec script air. So it's like it is not a linear journey, you know, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean every script is a failure if it doesn't get to the big screen, you know. In fact, like you have to start with a small goal, you know. Like this is I love your mountain climbing metaphor, Rose, because I think it's like every feature is a mountain problem, right? Like the reason there's not a lot of mountain climbers is because you can't just climb a mountain in a day, right? Like I can't wake up tomorrow and say I'm going to go climb a mountain. It's very, very difficult. And I think that writing a screenplay is a similar thing, right? Just like you were saying, like you can't just wake up tomorrow and write a feature. But you can write the first 5 pages, and then the next day you can write pages 6 through 10, and then you write pages 11 through 15. And I think the most important thing is write a movie you want to go see, right? If yes, the market is very hard right now, but if you don't want to go see your own movie, no one else is going to want to, you know? Like I can't tell you how many times I dealt with this, right? It's like I would love to write a great contained horror because it works and they get made, but that's just not my lane, you know? Like again, I'm going to use a bad sports metaphor, but like you got to wait for your pitch, you know? Like some batters hit curveballs better, some hit fastballs. Like you have to know what your pitch is, and you have to get your pitch in the zone and just swing as hard as you can. So it's I guess what I'm trying to say is you have to write for yourself. You have to travel the path before you can ask anyone else to go down it with you. And yes, sometimes it's dark and scary and uncertain. In fact, it almost always is. But if you're like, I have to get to the end because I love this story or I love this character, or I'm super passionate about this world, or like, F it, I want to go see this movie, then that's in a world where we know nothing, that's your only certainty, right? Is your own taste. Like it's a lot, and this is so like trite, I'm sorry I keep rambling on, but it's like, you know, it's like you got to be in love with it. You have to be, because it's going to be so hard. But just like the good relationships you have in your life, like the good times are worth the bad times. And I also think it's like you can't stay in a bad one for too long either, you know? Like there's nothing more valuable to a writer than a hot spec script. So like don't stay on the same one for 5 years just because you feel like you have to, you know. I do think it's a bit like being at the casino, you know, like you have to the way you win a lot of bets is by placing a lot of bets. So I do think in this tough market, it's like you want a new spec every 16 to 18 months. And I know that sounds daunting, but I do think like, and I just know it because I've been through it. Every time I feel like I've been in a corner in my career, like a spec script has gotten me out. And that's from my early days of being an unrep, you know, sort of like struggling writer, to thinking I had made it, but just kind of stuck on that treadmill of OWAs and pitches and sort of like low paying development stuff that like, yeah, technically I was a working writer, but like it didn't feel like it, you know, and it was like writing another spec that just got me back to where I wanted to go. So it's like always listen to your gut, you know, and I know that's trite and easy to say, but you gotta be it's like you know it when you see it, and if you say I love this idea, like that's the one you should be working on, regardless of sort of like genre or world or anything. It's just like you have to lead with passion.
Your way out of it is always seems to be very good advice. All right, bear with me. I'm having a little technical problems. I can't access the chat, but I have some questions on my phone from the audience. So this is for our production companies. In what situation would you rather receive a spec versus hear a pitch? And do the writer's level and credits factor into that decision when you're taking pitches?
Pretty open. Happy to hear happy to read a spec, happy to hear a pitch. I think if it's for Angela and Courtney's consideration, then, and I know I mentioned this earlier, like just a spec is just easier because they have a lot on their plate, and we want to just make sure that we have a clear runway in terms of like if it'll actually be something that's viable, you know, considering everything that they already have going on. So, but always happy to take a look at anything.
Absolutely the same. Yeah. I think that there are certain, you know, when you think about a concept that may be harder to grasp too, that's an example of a time where a spec can be really helpful, right? And it's difficult to really define what that is, but I think if you as the writer feel like, geez, I know there's something really amazing here, but it's probably not easily communicated in a log line or, a quarter of a page, then you need to start thinking about how do I show this in another way, right? Whether it's a full spec or even just a piece of one.
Yeah, I think, well, look, the further along a piece is, the less risk there is on the execution of it, right? Like, I have a spec, I can read the whole thing and I either like it or not. If it's a pitch, it's like, do I like the concept? Do I not? Okay, I like it. Now it becomes an execution question. And so, yes, I will hear it. I will think more of something if I get through a spec that I love. That is sort of the top of the pile for me. If it's a pitch that I love, it still has to go all those many months to the actual realization of it, right? So I will look at both, but I will feel more comfortable with the spec.
I think also to that point, actually, it depends a bit upon, at least for me, how seasoned the writer is bringing the pitch in, right?
Mhm.
If you're able to point to or reference other work, produced or not, right, that you really love, sometimes it releases a little bit of that pressure valve because you know that person's going to be able to execute on what they're pitching you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron Sorkin walks into my office. He can show me a can of soda and I'll go, yes. Like that all kinds of things matter, details around it.
Mm.
Michael, this speaks to the marketplace a little bit, and Olivia too. We're being told that the majority of features selling right now are high concept. First of all, is that true? And would you um, are you more interested in a high concept pitch, the log line, the thing that I know what this is? Um, and Olivia, same question.
I love this word high concept that we keep getting thrown around and no one really seems to know what it
I've
is.
never known what it means.
Exactly.
Ever.
Yeah.
It's a
Like,
it's a word that, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
No, it's okay. No, go ahead, please.
I heard the creator of Severance speak recently, and he mentioned, he said, I'm always hearing these great pitches. It's like, God, I get that, and I've never written that before. And he said, and then finally now I had it, and he like, so Severance was a high concept. He could pitch it in a sentence, and people were like, oh, now tell me more. So I think that's what we're talking about, as opposed to something a little murkier.
I mean, it sounds simplistic. I just want a great movie. I don't care if I can sell it to you in 30 seconds or if I can sell it to you like, I just want to make a great movie. And so to me, the high concept thing, I mean, I'm the one hearing it. I'm the one reading the script. I'm the one hearing the pitch. If I see the movie, whether I can sell it to somebody in 20 seconds or not, like, I'm gonna want to try and fight for it. So to me, it's not so much a quote unquote high concept as it is the whole shebang.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that to me, what I think everyone wants high concept to mean is unexpected, and therefore you lean in and do exactly what you described, kind of like, tell me more. What I want to hear more. So what's that thing that when you're doing the like traditional log line of boy meets girl and then boy loses girl to aliens and then the aliens happen to be related to the guy, like, I don't know, like something where it's terrible. I'm not a writer. But basically the idea being that like you hear something that is familiar but different enough that you go, oh, okay, keep going. That's high concept.
Tell me more. Part of the process of taking things out, writers are being told, pitch decks. Got to have a pitch deck. I got to see it. I had a producer. We brought a thing over at HBO, and he called it the monkey show. You got to put on the monkey show. So, what do we think about taking something out with or without a pitch deck?
Look, I think the more leaves you put on the tree, as long as they're great leaves, the better. It rounds out it fills out the picture for people, and to make things clear is fundamentally a good thing, I think. I don't think it's entirely necessary if you don't have it. If you have a director who certainly has a vision for it and has a sort of examples of the look and the flavor of everything, that's these people are spending a lot of money on these movies, and the more comfort you can give them, the better. Having said that, I don't think you're automatically negated by lacking one. My 2 cents.
I have a question for Alex.
Oh, was that not for me? Did I just butt in on somebody else's question?
No, that was for producers.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That was for you, Drew. That was
That
just
was a
for you.
room question.
Muting myself
Got
again.
that.
Welcome back to Drew's Inspirational Tangent. Alex, question for you. How did your script get out in the first place when you first spec'd it? You did say you showed it. He wants to know, did you send it to competitions? Did you have a rep? Did you send it to a rep?
Yeah, I was already repped at the time. So I sort of surprised both my manager and agent by saying like, hey, here's the spec I've been working on for the last year and it's probably unsellable. So good luck. And look, they did a great job getting it to targeted places. I know that's like not super interesting or helpful for the question. So it's like, I feel like sort of the question behind the question is like, how do you get a rep? And it gets back to that same advice of just like you need a spec, you need something that like a really exciting sample. For me, I did go the competition route. I had a couple scripts from film school, and I submitted them sort of all over to Nickel and Austin Film Festival. And I mean, God, this was 10+ years ago now, so I'm sure the landscape has changed dramatically. But I think that's a great route, like there's a paid version of the Blacklist where it's like, look, I mean, I'm not here to advertise for them, but if you're looking for like a quick reader-driven feedback on a piece of material, I think it's hard to do better than that service. So yeah, I think it's my other advice when it comes to like querying, which is something I get asked about a lot, is like go after assistants, because they're in the position that you are, which is they're, sort of like young and hungry, and they're going to be in a much more sort of like they want to become an agent or manager, right? So by proxy, that means they're going to be looking for exciting, young, fresh voices and clients. I think a mistake I certainly made and was never helpful was like trying to query, partners at agencies or like big managers who were repping like my favorite writers ever, and it's sort of like, you don't want to be the last client on their buck slip, like even if they sign you want to be like a good rep is someone who's really working for you, right? And obviously Olivia can talk about this way better than I can, but it's like having a manager that's not working for you is worse than not having a manager because they are your only route out into the industry. So I'm always like, go after someone younger and hungrier and someone where it's like you are sort of like, not to be hyperbolic, but like their lifeblood, like you want to be not their sole focus because that will never be the case, but you want to be sort of the person they're out talking about and sharing the material for. Again, sorry to go on this long rambling answer, but yeah, it all started with sort of competitions and getting a rep through that way, which started by just writing a spec that was exciting to me to start.
This was great. I promised to get everybody out by 8:30, so I'm going to do that. If anybody has a final word to share, now is the time. Otherwise, I'm going to let you all go.
It was nice speaking with all of you.
It was wonderful. Yeah.
Start a podcast.
What? Can we do it together?
Podcast. It's
Who said that?
Someone said, Drew, start a podcast. I think you need to.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed.
Drew, I'll find you some investors for it. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be one of them.
I just don't want to quit my day job. Okay.
Yeah. Side hustle. Why not?
Why not? Thank you.
This was amazing.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Well, and Ken, thank you for moderating. Really great work.
Yes.
Ken.
Greg, thank you for organizing everything.